Thanks for coming. I'm Janet Cassidy. I'm chair of the Clydebank Trade Council. I'll start from my left with Sue Gilchrist, who's on the STUC General Council and is a TUC rep. Sophie Johnson, who's the Secretary of Stop the War Scotland. Gordon Martin, who is the RMT Regional Officer, also a member of the General Council. And Andrea Bradley, Secretary of EIS, also a member of the General Council. So we've got
three General Council members?
Yes.
You both start complaining.
Why?
Makes a nice change. So, the meeting is all about healthcare and welfare and not warfare. So, I'll just start with you, Drew. That's okay?
Yeah, fine.
What I intend to do is give them 10 minutes each, if that's okay with you. And then we'll open it up to the floor.
Yeah, so as said, my name's Drew Gilchrist. I'm the new Trade Council delegate on the General Council STUC. I'm also the Secretary of the North Lancashire Trade Union Council. I'd like to thank Clydebank for inviting me along to speak, specifically on two main points in relation to the trade union movement, specifically trades councils, and how we've tried to push an anti-war or peace policy within the trade union movement. So as many people here might know, for the past at least four years that I've been attending the STC Congress, and there have been significant moves to try to get the trade union movement in Scotland to adopt a peace policy, or attempt to adopt a plan to move forward away from arms manufacturing or arms investment. Always met with quite vitriolic opposition from the major unions, one of them being my own, that represents arms workers, one of the last actual industrial bases in Scotland. So for 4 years we hit our head against the wall, getting absolutely nowhere, until last year we had somewhat of a breakthrough in a composite motion of several motions that came from trades councils that looked to see the three major unions, that being Prospect, Unite and GMB, and the trades councils, both my own, North Lancashire and Clydebank, that moved the motion, to get in a room and talk about what a peace policy for trade unions in Scotland would look like, and how that would develop a kind of change, a conversation around moving away from defence manufacturing to socially productive manufacturing. It took us about 9 months to actually get that meeting off the ground, for a plethora of different reasons. I think mainly just hoped it would fall under the carpet and we've forgotten about. But we eventually got that meeting, and it was productive, I think, to actually have the voices in the room. You get what you expect. You know, we've got to think about our members, jobs and their pay and terms and conditions, and we're saying fair enough, but you've got to think about your other members, your members in the health service, your members in the council, your members in social services and education, who have been directly affected by the austerity that's been used to plump up the arms industry, foreign multinational corporations that take the majority of their profit out of the communities that supposedly they're there to serve. So we had that meeting, and it was agreed that going forward the unions would go away and engage with their members and come back and have another one. I'm still waiting on an invite. But what we did have this year was success, once again pushed by the trades councils for a motion on a return to previous years, or a cap to a return on previous years spending on defence. It was pushed by, again, our trades council, but had major support from the other unions like PCS, Unison, RMT, with opposition for Unite, GMB and Prospect. But surprisingly, I think to a lot of people in the rooms, surprised, it passed, and we had really good, I think, camaraderie discussion in the hall about what a future away from defence spending would look like, but also a real gritty talk about how can we say that we're defending job paying conditions when we're sacrificing one section of the workforce or one section of our class for another benefit. A real dialectical kind of contradiction about how we look at improving union members' lives. So we had that success, and it was through no small feat. As I said, 4 years of organising, 4 years of debating, 4 years of discussion to get to this point. So really what we're needing to do now, and I'm glad there's 2 other General Council members here, first meeting's tomorrow, is really push the STUC to move ahead with that plan and move ahead with developing an argument for what a future industrial plan for Scotland would look like away from weapons manufacturing. It comes at a really important time. We've just had the election, and the SNP plans to cut further 0.5% of public service workforce. That is, despite the fact we're now 10% lower than it was in 15 years ago. So there's been a consistent decrease through austerity in the amount of workers within the public service. And that coupled with the fact that workers' pay as a whole hasn't kept up the pace of wealth at the top end of Scotland. And that's real terms increase of there's been a real terms increase of about 22% compared to 375% for the wealthy and the rich. So we're seeing an increase in wealth disparity, we're seeing an increase in poverty, a decrease in our public services. But the British government is looking to utilise weapons manufacturing as a stimulus for the economy, despite the fact it only produces 1% overall GDP. And those areas throughout the UK where weapons manufacturing is a major industry are some of the poorest, with Barrow and Forest. They're the poorest in the country because it's an industry that's so specialised and so encapsulated in such a tiny area with such a low amount of labour required for it, that it brings absolutely nothing back to the local communities or to the national economy. The dominant amount of capital or profit that it produces is sent to the United States. So it's nothing that us as a people or a country benefit from. So it's really interesting that these motions and this kind of analysis of where the movement is comes from the trades councils, because the trade councils act as a conduit, as a connecting point between political, social and industrial struggles that the working class face in Scotland. So they could only come really from these areas. It brings us into contradiction with some of our own unions, but it allows us to force the conversation to be had. Yeah, that's kind of to sum up very quickly there, but really, yeah, the importance of trades councils is it allows us to bring these really militant working class ideas to what can be a very stagnant debate, and it allows us to hold a mirror to the movement and say, if jobs, terms and conditions are your main priority, then why are we sacrificing one section of membership for another?
Thanks, Drew. Let Robert come down. Can you see here right at the back? Because I noticed John and Robert have come forward. Aye. Sophie?
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me here today, and thanks Drew for that. I think I'm going to first speak a little bit more generally about the situation. I think instinctively people understand that we are living obviously in very, very dangerous times, but also quite changed times too. I think if we even went back some 25 years ago when we were under another Labour government, which was taking us into war in Iraq and Afghanistan, when people were marching against those wars, I think few people even then could have predicted the type of world that we'd be living in now, such a volatile situation. And there's a risk here of kind of just listing all the different conflicts that are happening right now, but I do think it's worth underlining the scale of the crisis a little bit. We've obviously got the war with Iran that was launched by the United States and Israel, a war which we are apparently not involved in at all, even though our bases have been used to conduct it, and even though we can see the bloody planes at Prestwick every day. We've also had the brazen attacks on Latin America, on Venezuela, the strangulation of Cuba that is continuing just now. It's not now unusual for the President of the United States to threaten to attack a whole series of different countries, including allies, or even threaten to wipe out an entire civilization. And let's not forget, we also have war continuing in Europe, a war that could yet turn into nuclear confrontation, a war where the casualty rates have reached into the millions, but European leaders still seem determined to keep going at any cost to us or to the people that are fighting it. And through this, of course, we have the slaughter of the Palestinians, which is now etched into our brains. And the Lebanese people who are facing the same wrath by Israel, which has been armed by American weapons, by European weapons and British weapons too. So everywhere, war and the threat of war is becoming much more frequent. The way war is being carried out is changing. The human cost is getting much greater. In short, what I think we are seeing is a total disintegration of that old world order that was there at the beginning of this century, and a disintegration that has been underpinned first and foremost by an extremely volatile United States. And of course, this is a crisis which the British government have their hands all over, have been right in the thick of it from the start. But they've already decided, the British government, they've already decided, as Jay was saying, that we are going to be paying for this whole situation. We're already paying for the immediate consequences of the Iran war. We're actually only just seeing the beginning of this situation. Food prices are still going to go up, energy prices are still going to be rising higher. The British government is not going to be taking any of the measures necessary that would be required to take some of the burden off the working class. The mere suggestion of a cap on food prices has led to mass hysteria amongst the ruling class, and the Scottish Government for their part have promised to cap food, and they may still do that yet, but to me it seems that they are already rolling back on these measures. We're also going to be paying, we are already paying now for a mass militarisation programme. The most parasitic industry, as Drew has said, has been welcomed with open arms by both the British government and the Scottish government, which this year lifted the ban on public money going into munitions, and military spending is obviously going up all the time. This is the only bit of state spending that is protected. It is absolutely sacrosanct, unlike the public sector, where we're going to be seeing some 20,000 plus jobs cut in Scotland alone. So yeah, unlike social security, unlike welfare, unlike any of this, all of which will absolutely be cut to fund this insatiable defence drive. But it's not just these costs that are going to cripple us. Increasingly, we're also being told that we're going to be paying with our lives. The same thing is happening across Europe now. Things are getting worse at home. Public money is being diverted into defence, and conscription has become a reality in places like Germany and France. They're taking steps towards this. In Denmark, they've just added women to the draft. I mean, how progressive, fantastic. More and more they're talking about it here too, and this is exactly where we're headed. This is an absolute war hysteria that has taken over the British establishment and the European establishment now. The other day you had the army take over a tube station in central London to cosplay commanding a war against Russia. This is an incredibly dangerous posture, and you now have military experts that are coming out onto the BBC all the time to tell us how we need to prepare for war, how war is inevitable, as if they have absolutely no say in the matter. This is extremely serious. So the demands, of course, of welfare, not warfare, the fight against what is becoming a wholesale redistribution of wealth away from us, away from the working class, into the hands of the arms companies. And the ability to resist this logic of our leaders, which are champing at the bit to take us towards disaster, is absolutely important, it's absolutely vital. And another point I want to make is that this resistance that we are going to launch, that we are going to have to launch, is not going to be easy, because as we know, that attacks on civil liberties come thick and fast at times of war. They're already talking, they're wanting to get rid of juries, and the Palestine Solidarity Movement, the anti-war movement, have obviously been in the thick of it, and that is no coincidence. But we've resisted so far, and we will resist again. But on all these fronts, I'm conscious of my time. A strong anti-war movement is at an absolute premium. And so the last point I really want to make here today is that we are quite lucky in this country. We do have quite a strong anti-war movement, an unusually strong one. In fact, it's often commented on how strong the British anti-war movement has been, and it's proved itself to be a thorn in the British establishment time and time again over the years, and in particular over the last few years. But I think we do have two urgent priorities for the period ahead. We need to, in my opinion, internationalise this struggle, and we need to deepen it further into the bowels of the organised working class and the trade unions. We need more of the efforts of the trades councils that have managed to push through this vote in the STUC. We need more of this. And here we can look to places in Europe, we can look to the dock workers in Italy, for example, which have led a general strike for Palestine. And we also need to be honest that we are not close to that point in this country, and we need to try and understand why that is. We need to work at kind of how we can be much stronger on these things. So as a contribution to this effort, we do have a major international anti-war conference coming up next month. Thousands of trade unionists are going to be there. Branches across the UK have already backed it, including trades councils in Scotland, Unison branches, UCU branches, all sorts of branches in Scotland are sending delegates. So if your branch has not already done so, please do back this conference. We will have Genoa dock workers there. There are going to be people from La France Amazine, from the school kids that are striking against conscription. At the moment, a whole host of people are going to be there. And so I think that we need more things like this. We need to be thinking about doing similar things in Scotland. We need to be thinking about things really on this mass scale, because the truth is we are the only force in society that is going to be capable of confronting what's coming, and we are the only people that are actually going to be able to confront those that are dragging into this new era of war, and our fight, I'm afraid, has only just begun.
Giving us a lot to think about. And I know it's not just food prices that are going up, fuel prices. I heard yesterday that the price of oil had apparently gone down.
Yeah.
But I passed a garage on Saturday, £1.71 for a litre of petrol, which I thought was ridiculous. And I'm not sure if there used to be, in fact years ago, there used to be an American airbase up near Lossiemouth, and I don't know if that's still there.
That's still there, the area.
Aye.
Yeah.
And it's still American.
Still American, yeah.
Aye. So they've been here for quite a long time.
I think the question about the oil is that a lot of the oil that's at £1.70 whatever it is a litre, a lot of that oil was in the country already. So it's blatant
Aye.
profiteering.
Aye.
And we get the government coming on with these kind of like empty words saying, oh, we're going to deal with it. But still, it's just blatant profiteering.
Aye.
And what can we do about it, do you know what I mean? What can we do other than, do you know what I mean, everybody mask not putting petrol in their car? That's not going to work. But it'd be interesting to see just how much oil was actually in this country before new stuff had to be imported to put the prices up, because I think the war was declared the day and the prices went up the morning. That's blatant profiteering. Yeah.
Well, we're going to go to the rest of the panel and then we'll open it up to the floor.
Yeah. Gordon?
Okay. Well, thanks Janet, and thanks to Clydebank Trades Council for the invite. I'm like Drew from North Lanarkshire Trades Council, so we've got two of the best trades councils in Scotland coming together here, which I'm proud to say. North Lanarkshire Trades Council, just like you guys out here, have got a proud history, an anti-war history, anti-poverty and pro-trade union and pro-working class solidarity. So that's good to keep the links going. You know, the thing about speaking third after two excellent speakers is you're sitting there thinking, right, Drew's covered that, Sophie's covered that, what am I going to cover? So I'm delighted that the member of the audience has widened the debate and we can start talking about the economic impact.
Andrea, you've no chance.
So I might leave some for Andrea at the end. That's the worst thing about going last. So you've got the economic impacts as well as the slaughter of soldiers on the front line. What we have witnessed in our lifetime, you know, I always thought genocide would be my parents' and grandparents' lifetime and I would never see it, but we've seen it live basically on the telly here for month after month with Israel, America, Britain, all these countries in collusion, while Israel has bombed Gaza back to the Stone Age. Men, women and children indiscriminately slaughtered, and people are making a killing out of that. Warmongering governments and the people that warmongering governments deal with are making a fortune while people are getting bombed back to the Stone Age and indiscriminately slaughtered. And what are we doing about that? You know, Sophie's talking about the anti-war movement in Britain and elsewhere in Europe and beyond, you know, try to do what it can, but is it doing enough? Do we ever do enough? I would say no, we're not doing anywhere near enough. But the problem is that the working class at this time, in my view, I suppose you would put it as education of the working class, is probably at a pretty historically low level. And probably since the last 20 years for the economic crash in 2007, 2008, because people are just trying to keep their head down and batter through and live from week to week or month to month, payday to payday. That is how people are living their lives. And that situation isn't going to get any better unless we change it. We are the only people on the planet, and by that I mean the working class, are the only people that can change our outlook for ourselves and our kids and our grandkids, because nobody else is interested in doing it. The political elite, the political class are in hock to the military complex. You know, you slap one of them in the arse, it really hits the two of them. Opposite cheeks of the same arse, really, is what I'm saying. You know, the boss class, the politicians, and the military wing of that setup. So that's where we find ourselves. You know, food is becoming unaffordable. People can't heat their house and feed their wains. And this is in 2026 in Scotland. We have a jobs crisis in the North Sea, while we have an energy crisis ashore. Absolute madness. And only capitalism could take you there. Any other economic system would say, how do we fix this problem? And they would look at it and say, okay, the planet's heating up, we've got a problem, we need to find a way of utilising energy in a different way from we have in the last century or so. That's fine, but you don't just say, that's it, turn the taps off and let these people swing. Thousands of offshore jobs are potentially going to go. In this so-called just transition, there is no justice there. People are being thrown in the scrap heap, while this country continues to import oil and gas from all over the place, including, it would seem, Russia shortly. They're going to lift the sanctions, according to media reports, and allow Russian oil to come in because of the problem that Trump has caused, American capitalism, gangster capitalism, has caused in the Middle East, in the Straits of Hormuz. And Iran are now getting the blame for that. Now, my memory's not what it used to be, but as far as I can remember, America and Israel attacked Iran. Now, any country, I'm not a pacifist by any manner of means, I'm not looking for war, but any country that gets attacked has got the right to defend itself. So Iran quite rightly says, well, strategically that's dead important. Let's tell them they're not going through there, or we'll sink their ships. Oh, before you know it, you've got a huge energy and other goods and commodities crisis right across the world, caused by Trump and the gangster capitalists in America and the genocide murdering political elite in Israel, backed up by the tin pot Labour government here in the UK. So that's the crisis we've got. So what do we do? The trade union movement, in my view, has done absolutely nowhere near enough, and I'm not criticising any particular union. This is across the board, including my own union. Words are fine, but we need deeds and we need actions. Because the words, while we have speeches and contributions and marches, people are still dying. People are still being slaughtered. People are still being starved, including in this country. People can't heat their houses in the winter. They want to cool it the night right enough, but you know, such as the seasonal adjustments, I suppose. But that is the situation we find ourselves in. And the trade union movement, in my view, isn't doing enough. The politicians won't do anything. The politicians won't do anything unless they're pushed from below. The political parties have been hollowed out. I mean, back in the day, the Labour Party was a mass party. So were the Tories. The Tories, these were all mass parties, hundreds of thousands of members. Now, we had an election there earlier this month. Not one party came anywhere near my door. Now, whether that's because they know I live there, or if it's just because they don't have the activists, I don't know. But I'll take a guess it's they don't have the activists. And that'll be the same probably elsewhere in North Lanarkshire and out here in Clydebank. And they've not got the activists because people have been turned off. The only ideology now for these political elites is bending the knee to the boss class. That is the only ideology there is. There is no, solidarity with people in struggle, solidarity with workers at home, or people being slaughtered abroad. That is the reality. We get a few, and they're not, you can't tar them all with the same brush. There are one or two honourable exceptions amongst the political class that are speaking up the way we are speaking up and attending demos and doing everything they can as well. But you can have the best handful of politicians in the world. They're not going to change anything. They can provide a lead that people can follow. But unfortunately, what we see is gobshites like Farage and co are getting the attention of the working class. Now, they're getting the attention of the working class. I don't believe for a minute that the people of Britain have all of a sudden went back to the 1970s and adopted misogynistic and homophobic and racist views. Now, there will be people like that, of course there is, but they were always there. It's just they kept their trap shut for a while, as it looked as if society was doing a bit of progress. Now we're regressing, and the Farages and all that, the boy, Matt's pal, the boy Kerr in Glasgow, these guys are getting, I know that, but just clarify, these people are getting an echo, not because people have all of a sudden became homophobic, racist, misogynistic, etc., but because they're desperate. They're desperately seeking a way out of their economic and social conditions. And nobody is offering them that. I mean, if you bothered, and unfortunately for my job, I have to read some of this, the manifestos of some of the parties there at the Scottish election just the other week there. God, I'm glad I was reading them at 9 o'clock in the morning rather than 9 at night, because they've been out like a light. Absolute crap, timid managerialism. We need bold, transformative policies to turn around the state of this country. And you can take this country as Scotland, I want independence, or you can take it as Britain, I want out of Britain. But you take it as anyone you like. What a state the state is in. What a state. So what are we going to do about it? I've been saying the same old record, and other people on the platform and the audience have been saying it as well. We need to start to turn that situation around. We, being the trade union movement, the political parties aren't going to do it. They're no interested in doing it. So it's up to us. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to need to start from the bottom up. There's no point in looking to, no offence Andrea, maybe looking to general secretaries or full-time officials like myself. It's got to come from the bottom. The Trades Council, the local branches, etc. It's got to come from there. They've got to show leadership in the workplace. They've got to argue against the crap that Farage and Co come out with. Point out that Trump is a real danger in the world. You know, you get the British media, and it'll be the same in America and all that, no doubt, going about the threat from China. I've not seen China kidnap a world leader or bomb anywhere, anytime lately. I've not seen it. Again, my memory ain't what it used to be, but I'm pretty sure the person doing all this, or the bandit capitalist class doing this, is America in cahoots with the poodles like Britain, etc., the British ruling and political elite. So that's the reality. So we need to oppose the genocide. Obviously that should be, every human being should oppose that. Unfortunately, every human being doesn't, even the rich and powerful are perpetrating it, while working class people like us are up in arms about it. But because we're not organised properly, we're unable to do anything about it. So from a British perspective, we need to get organised from the bottom up. You can have marches in Glasgow and Edinburgh every week in life if you want, in London and all the rest of it. But see, if you're not hurting their economy, they couldn't care less. So if we're going to get serious about it, we need to employ serious tactics, civil disobedience, general strikes, etc., etc. Now we're a million miles away from all that now, but we're only a million miles away from that now because of the low political level within the class at the moment. And we need to work every day to try and change that. Because if we don't, we're going to be the generation that pass on far inferior conditions, social and economic conditions, to our kids and grandkids. Society's not supposed to go that way. So my plea to everybody was, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we need to get out there and we need to continue to work within our communities, work within our trade unions, work at the local level, the branches, the trades councils, to turn the mindset around. You know, and I said this at something I was speaking at the weekend. I'm not one of these people that say when it comes to reform, etc., don't debate with them. Absolutely not. I'd love to debate with them right here, right now, in this place being rammed out with people. Loads of people supporting them, because you can destroy their arguments. They're tin men, basically. Their arguments are based on hatred of other working class people who may or may not come from this country. That is pretty much their whole argument. Millionaires, probably billionaires in among them, try to preach that they're for the workers. Before I was speaking at a thing on Sunday morning staff conference, and Sunday I was watching what laughingly passes for politics on British telly. And all you get out of reform is we're the party of the workers. It's enough to make you sick, man. But I would love to really get right in about them and debate with them, with people there. Not the sanitised TV debates, but real life debates like in halls like this. and really put them to shame for what they are, absolute chancellors. Thank you.
All of that. Okay.
I'll try. Yeah, so I mean, some of what I'm going to say will overlap with what other speakers have contributed. And, you know, every speaker has mapped out, you know, truths about the, you know, the kind of geopolitical situation, the political situation here in Scotland and the wider UK. And you could despair, you really could despair. You could despair, you know, night after night, turning on the news, day after day, reading a newspaper, just at how much challenge there is there for us to try and take on as a trade union movement. But it's maybe symptomatic of the fact that I'm a teacher, maybe symptomatic of the fact that I'm a trade unionist, that somehow I don't get dragged down by despair. And I think that that's one of the kind of like intrinsic characteristics of the trade union movement, intrinsic characteristics of trade unionists. We do what we do because we believe that we can take all of that on, that we can take all of it on by working together, standing together, strategising together, taking the kind of action together that Gordon was talking about, and actually turning the dial, shifting the dial on the kinds of things that, you know, that all of us here are going to be outlining for you. I was a little bit worried when Tam invited me to come and speak because your theme was welfare, not warfare, and obviously I'm a teacher, I'm a general secretary of an education trade unionist, and by the way, I do think that there's a role for general secretaries. I think there's a role for every single one of us in this movement, and we've all got to use the platform, the power, the positionality that we've got in order to really kind of press forward on issues that are actually existential issues. These are not just like matters of trivia or vanity projects or anything like that. These are existential threats that we're talking about, and every single one of us has got a part to play in that. But when Tam invited me, I was concerned because I was going to come and talk about education, and it doesn't fit directly into the kind of welfare zone, but hopefully in what I'm going to say, you'll see that there are very, very strong very, very strong overlaps and strong relevance to what I want to talk to you about. So I'm just going to start by saying that Scotland's teachers and lecturers, the members that my union represents, are providing education to children, young people and learners of all ages against the kind of troubled backdrop that Sophie in particular and then followed by Gordon really kind of illustratively mapped out for us. But a backdrop that comprises a phony culture war deliberately provoked by populist and far-right activists backed by billionaires, and culture wars that are designed to cause division and resentment among ordinary people like you and me, pitting one minoritised or disadvantaged group against another with misinformation and disinformation, especially across social media, that is absolutely awash with it. And I don't know if people were hearing the news today about the destructive impact that medics across the UK are saying that social media has on our young people. They're comparing it with the harms of smoking. That's how seriously they're taking it. And we know that those same billionaires, who are backing all of that, are stoking fear and insecurity on a global scale, to the point where you've got conscription and preparation for conscription again in Germany, France, and Denmark being incredibly egalitarian in the way that it's going to conscript its citizens by including women in the call-up. Trade wars provoked by the Trump administration that brazenly tramples over the rights to self-determination of numerous countries and does so with it does so with actual impunity. And our members are providing education to learners of all ages and stages against a backdrop of actual war, again as Sophie has outlined, armed conflict in Ukraine, the continuing devastation and destruction in Palestine, and the US war against Iran that's rained death and destruction onto the country against civilians, including many children, many school children, with Israel culpable in spreading that conflict even further across the region. And of course, that's had a wider impact on a global scale, causing incalculable incalculable harm to the world financial system and increasing the cost of everything, again, as comrades here have been outlining. The clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, how we heat our homes, travelling to work, school, college, university, the cost of all of that has skyrocketed. And meanwhile, public funds that could be usefully spent on education and social security are being displaced to defence spending, with consequent impacts on economic growth resulting in lower tax yield and less available funds for public spending. So a vicious and costly cycle that's causing real human harm to our citizens. So these are troubled times, and in troubled times we need critical thinking, we need political literacy, we need conflict resolution skills to help navigate those turbulent times, and people need hope. People need hope. And education teaches the knowledge and skills that we need, those skills that I was outlining there, and not only gives hope, it's a nation's expression of hope for its present and for its future, and that's why education so matters in this discussion that we're having. So hope that progress is possible and that we can achieve a fairer, more democratic, prosperous, more peaceful society of the kind that all of us who are here tonight would wish to see. And where would we as human beings be without hope? Where would we be without hope? But for that hope to be realised, we need to demand that our resources are committed, not to weapons and warfare, but to quality education, to well-funded, sustainable learning and teaching for all of our children, young people and adult learners. And so the EIS and our members have hope. We have hope. We are a hopeful organisation. We have hope and we have conviction in calling for much greater investment in Scottish education from early years all the way through to the higher education that takes place in our universities. And we make that case because we value education as the cornerstone of a socially just and equitable society, as the bedrock of democracy, and as an essential component of social cohesion and of peace itself. The antidote to the politics of hate and division in our communities, in our country and globally. It is that powerful. Education is that powerful, and that is why we make this case, with such conviction. And Gordon talked about the tripe that he read ahead of the Scottish Parliament election in the form of the various manifestos. I share your underwhelmed response, to what you were reading. But ahead of that election, the EIS launched our manifesto, and we called for an extra £1 billion a year to be spent on early years and school education. And we make no apology for asking for that additional sum to be channelled into education, because we know the dividends that investment in education pays socially and economically for the longer term. We know that the quality of our children's education now will determine the quality of our future society, and of course every single one of us has got a stake in that. So our future society and its health, its prosperity and its cohesion, and it is as simple as that. We will reap what we sow. We will reap what we sow as a society. Invest in weapons and we'll have war and our people will suffer. Read your history. Everybody here, I'm sure, is well aware of the kind of recent history, longer ago history, and the horrific devastation that war wreaks on societies, communities, families, individuals. And we know, all of us, a bayonet is a weapon with a worker at either end of it. McLean was absolutely right about that. And the only beneficiaries of war are the billionaires who have amassed fortunes through the manufacture and the sale of weapons and the other accoutrements of war. They're the only beneficiaries from it. But if we invest in our people by investing in education instead of in the industries of militarism and destruction, we give ourselves a fighting chance of creating the kind of society that every single one of us in here wishes to see and works, and strives to see. So we want to see investment in a strong future for Scotland through a virtuous cycle of investment that includes early intervention, early education through the restoration of the number of GTCS registered teachers, and early education to at least 2012 and ideally 2007 levels. That was point number 1 in this manifesto that I'm talking about. Scottish Government's own statistics show that the ratio of qualified teachers to pupils in early years in 2010 was 1 to 60. But with a 54% reduction in the number of nursery teachers since then, the ratio just last year was sitting at almost 1 to 120 kids, right? That's decimation of the numbers of qualified teachers in nursery. So teachers now having double the number of pupils to support over that time period. And interestingly, the OECD comparator on that, the average, is 13 pupils per teacher in early years. So Scotland is way, way behind the UK. I think it's something like 1 to 32. But still behind the OECD average, but better than Scotland's doing. So public funds need to be channelled towards our youngest citizens. They are our collective future, after all. So bairns, not bombs, wains, not weapons, all of those slogans, they are slogans, but they are absolute truths in terms of EIS policy in regards to how we need to prioritise our public spending. The EIS in that manifesto also called for class sizes in our schools to be capped at a maximum of 20 across all ages, stages and subjects. Now, tens of thousands of kids in Scotland's schools today were being taught in stifling classrooms of up to 33 kids in them at once. That's the reality, the length and breadth of the country. More so in the Central Belt. Some of our rural communities benefit from smaller class sizes and that, but Central Belt, that would be the norm, up to 33 kids. Class sizes of 20 would bring Scotland in line with the OECD average on class sizes. And it's no accident that smaller class sizes is a unique selling point for private schools. It's why we see that emblazoned all over the backs of buses, that their class sizes are maxed out at 12. That's the maximum that they have for their kids. So our public education system should be funded in parity with the private sector. Again, we make no apology for wishing to see that. Smaller class sizes, more teachers. You know that Scotland has 1,688 teachers fewer on the front line in our schools, classrooms, corridors today than we did in 2007. And we are 4,000 fewer than the target set by the SNP in 2011 when they said that they were going to recruit 3,500 additional teachers. And meanwhile, levels of poverty in Scotland have skyrocketed, as have the numbers of children and young people with additional support needs. And there's a huge overlap in the incidence of additional support needs and the incidence of young people experiencing poverty. So disproportionate numbers of kids living in poverty also we also present with an additional support need. So our politicians at UK and Scottish Government levels need to put our money where their mouths are, and start eradicating child poverty and stopping the damage that poverty does to people, to communities, not just in the short term, but for years, for whole lifetimes, and for decades and generations to come. Nurture, not destroy. And nurture by delivering universal free school meals to every single school and nursery-aged child. That was another call in our manifesto. Universal free school meals for all school-aged children and young people and the kids who go to nursery, because hunger and stigma don't stop at primary 5. All children and young people must be able to benefit from the physical, mental and emotional health and well-being benefits that come from sitting down with their pals and eating a healthy school lunch, and the cognitive benefits that come from good diet and nutrition and being able to share meals on an equal footing with their peers, no child or young person stigmatised. These should be staples. These should be staples of any high-quality education system, and they must be prioritised when it comes to public spending. Welfare, not warfare. Less than £1 billion extra each year spent on Scottish education would fund thousands more teachers, including in nursery, smaller class sizes, better additional support needs provision and universal free school meals. You could get all of that. We've had it costed by the Institute for Public Policy Research. That is all achievable for less than £1 billion additional per year. So we're calling for bread and roses and books rather than bombs and bullets, because we know that they do our children, young people, none of us any good whatsoever. And similarly, further and higher education are also absolutely essential for any decent, prosperous society and for any well-functioning democracy. Our colleges and universities must be properly funded and governed to enable high-quality learning, teaching and research. And the EIS is clear on the value of lifelong learning and education in our colleges, which should be at the heart of their working-class communities. They are being dried up of resources, they are being commercialised, they are being influenced over heavily by the private sector, and they are finding it more and more difficult to do the job that colleges would traditionally have done in educating working class people beyond school and doing it on a lifelong learning basis. our universities sharing and growing the knowledge that human society has built over millennia. This is how we solve the problems that we have in front of us. We don't have to do it by arms races, we don't have to do it by territorialism, we don't have to do it by the kind of gangster politics that we see Donald Trump and his cronies do across the world. So comrades, as educators, as trade unionists, as the educated, however we've been educated, we know the value and the power of quality education for healthy, prosperous, equitable, cohesive, peaceful societies. The value and the power of quality education for equality, social justice and democratic citizenship. We must champion peace, justice and equality, not just as slogans, but as strategy. And that was part of the discourse that we had at the recent STUC Congress, which, Drew, by the way, EIS also supported that composite motion that you were talking about. Because real security isn't measured in weapons, weapon stockpiles, it's measured in whether people have got houses, whether they've got decent wages, decent public services, and whether critically they've got that hope for the future that I'm talking about, comes through education. And a world where working people can live with dignity is a world that is more stable, more prosperous and more secure for all of us, and we believe that education is absolutely critical to that strategy. Trade unions, especially those in education, must continue to robustly defend education as a public good, crucial for a well-informed, democratic and peaceful society as proactive defence of humanity. And I think I'm going to leave it there, comrades, but I'm happy to contribute further to the discussion. I'm just conscious of time. Thanks very much.
I'll be very quick and I'll come back on 2 points. One of the many hats I wear in the trade union movement, even though I might not look like it, is I'm chairing the National Union Members Committee for Unite. And one of the real issues we found within the trade union movement when it comes to getting young people active, because I shouldn't say my union yet, I'm about to give a statistic. Under 9% of our accredited reps are under the age of 30, over 50% are over the age of 50. So within 10 years, Unite could possibly lose the entire shop steward movement. It's a real issue, and we've raised it with the General Secretary. But a big problem we've found within the trade union movement is that there's no succession planning being done to develop young people that come into the movement, either just joining in their workplace or looking to get active within Unite community, etc. like that. There's no real succession planning to move them through the structures of the union, and often there's blockages for them, for comrades that have been there for 30, 40, in some cases 50 years. So we're really trying to address that, but also the union wasn't looking at industrial issues that could be seen specifically addressing problems that young people in society are facing. So when I took over, one of the major campaigns we launched was looking at a national housing campaign for Unite. So that's the housing crisis facing young members, so building more public housing, organising apprentices within the construction centre, so bringing them into it. So it's bringing together all, finding this social issue that affects young people and bringing all the industrial, political, social aspects of it into a campaign. And through that we've seen an increase in the amount of accredited young reps we're bringing under the age of 30. Very short, but trying to watch time. The second point was, within North Lancashire, we have really good relationship with some of our councillors, MSPs, etc. One of them, Richard Leonard, who has been a massive support for the Trades Council and who we try and get along to as many events that we're holding as possible. But the reason we do that is because we understand the need for a united front, of building a united front of, we call them socialists, communists, progressives, whatever, people within the working class that want to change their lot and want to support their communities, support their colleagues, support their wains, their whoever, they just want to build a better country. And the united front has to be the basis of that, bringing local groups, sports groups, community theatre groups, trade unions, trades councils, all local councillors, anyone that will side with us must join this, be part of the united front and develop a strategy for an alternative economic system for the working class. I've tried to be as quick as I can there. I hope that's all right.
I don't have a great deal to add except to join in onto the kind of theme of hope, because we're obviously talking and we do need to start from the reality that things are pretty damn bad. in this country. But we also need to understand as well that we have had several points in the last 10, 15, 20 years where we have had an uptick in young people and in working class people being involved in politics in a much more, much stronger way than in lots of downtime. So we had the Scottish independence movement, for example. We had hosts of working class people seriously activated in their communities and so on. And we've had a similar situation with Palestine in recent times. So I think that is a point that we need to take on and to think about and to build on. The fact is that when people think that a movement is capable of taking on the powers that be, as these movements have done, the Palestine Solidarity Movement has infected the political sphere. It is not Labour parliamentarians out of their seats. It's a similar situation in Scotland, even when Angus Robertson was chucked out of his seat lately. It has been a situation where we've had the Metropolitan Police come out on telly and try and smear an entire movement just weeks before an election. We have managed to create a situation where not only are millions of people coming out into the streets and are still coming out into the streets even though the political situation has slightly changed, but a situation where a great deal of our leaders are very, very, very worried indeed. And so that is something that I think that we should have some hope from. And I think that's something that we should be able to build on. So I just want to end there just to bring us up a little bit.
I'll be very, very brief. Some of you in here will be old enough to remember Maggie Thatcher. She claimed that her greatest achievement was New Labour, which really meant a new political elite, whether it's Labour, SNP, you can have any colour of Tory party you like, basically in Britain at this moment in time, and Reform are just an add-on to that. So that's the situation. And what the political elite have done, or tried to do, and succeeded in a lot of ways, is divided communities. They've made old people terrified of young people. There are no more natural ally than an old person and a young person in reality. You know, you see grandkids with their grandparents and all that. The bond there is unbreakable, but these people are trying to break that. You know, Mick McGahey, and I'll finish on this, Mick McGahey, shortly after the miners' strike, spoke about how it wasn't just about breaking the trade union movement, it was about breaking the welfare state. And to break the welfare state, they had to break the trade union movement and create New Labour, the Tories, or any colour of Tory you want. And they have largely succeeded in that. So we are trying to now turn around 30 odd years of regression in social, economic and political situations. And the only way we can do that is raising class consciousness, class awareness, class education, but first and foremost, class solidarity. That is one thing to fear more than anything else. So we've got to start from there. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I would probably just sum up by saying that what we need to do is intentionally and with like laser focus educate, agitate, organise, and we organise inside workplaces, inside unions, union to union, workplace to workplace, community group to community group, and, you know, create this kind of like, I don't know, organic kind of, you know, network, you know, massive network of organisations and individuals that are of like mind, and start to rebuild some of that solidarity that the influence of, you know, Thatcher, neoliberalism, reform, the billionaires that are backing these, you know, these individuals and that sort of like so-called political party that they've tried to dismantle. And what you're talking about, you know, that kind of like maybe suspicion and hostility, across communities, within communities, you know, the othering of you know, individuals and groups because of jobs that they do or whatever. I think that we've got to really work hard to counteract that, because none of these people are our enemies. None of these people are our enemies. We know who the enemies are, and we've got to build all of that into the education, agitation, organising against all of that. And I would say we have done this before. We've done it many, many times before. We've got the muscle memory. We can do the, you know, the kind of revisiting of some of the, you know, some of the ideas, some of the, you know, the things that have worked previously. But I think the knowledge that we can do it should really propel us to a state of consciousness that says that we will do it, and we have to do it together, and we have to do it with solidarity.
It just leaves me to thank the panel for giving up their time and the rest of you for attending. Thanks very much. Hope you have a safe journey home.
Thank you.